There once lived in a town of Persia two brothers, one named Cassim and the other Ali Baba. Their father divided a small inheritance equally between them. Cassim married a very rich wife and became a wealthy merchant. Ali Baba married a woman as poor as himself and lived by cutting wood and bringing it upon 3 asses into the town to sell. One day, when Ali Baba was in the forest and had just cut wood enough to load his asses, he saw at a distance a great cloud of dust, which seemed to approach him. He observed it with attention and distinguished soon after a body of horsemen whom he suspected might be robbers. He determined to leave his asses to save himself. He climbed up a large tree, planted on a high rock, whose branches were thick enough to conceal him, and yet enabled him to see all that passed without being discovered. The troop, who were to the number of 40, all well mounted and armed, came to the foot of the rock on which the tree stood, and there dismounted. Every man unbridled his horse, tied him to some shrub, and hung about his neck a bag of corn which they had brought behind them. Then each of them took off his saddlebag, which seemed to Ali Baba from its weight to be full of gold and silver. One, whom he took to be their captain, came under the tree in which Ali Baba was concealed, and making his way through some shrubs, pronounced these words, "Open, Sesame." As soon as the captain of the robbers had thus spoken, a door opened in the rock, and after he had made all his troop enter before him, he followed them, when the door shut again of itself. The robbers stayed some time within the rock, during which Ali Baba, fearful of being caught, remained in the tree. At last the door opened again, and as the captain went in last, so he came out first, and stood to see them all pass by him. When Ali Baba heard him make the door close by pronouncing these words, "Shut, Sesame," every man at once went and bridled his horse, fastened his wallet, and mounted again. When the captain saw them all ready, he put himself at their head, and they returned the way they had come. Ali Baba followed them with his eyes as far as he could see them, and afterward stayed a considerable time before he descended. Remembering the words the captain of the robbers used to cause the door to open and shut, he had the curiosity to try if his pronouncing them would have the same effect. Accordingly, he went among the shrubs, and perceiving the door concealed behind them, stood before it and said, "Open, Sesame." The door instantly flew wide open. Ali Baba, who expected a dark, dismal cavern, was surprised to see a well-lighted and spacious chamber, which received the light from an opening at the top of the rock, and in which were all sorts of provisions, rich bales of silk, stuff, brocade, and valuable carpeting piled upon one another, gold and silver ingots in great heaps, and money in bags. The sight of all these riches made him suppose that this cave must have been occupied for ages by robbers, who had succeeded one another. Ali Baba went boldly into the cave and collected as much of the gold coin, which was in bags, as he thought his 3 asses could carry. When he had loaded them with the bags, he laid wood over them in such a manner that they could not be seen. When he had passed in and out as often as he wished, he stood before the door, and pronouncing the words, "Shut, Sesame," the door closed of itself. He then made the best of his way to town. When Ali Baba got home, he drove his asses into a little yard, shut the gates very carefully, threw off the wood that covered the panniers, carried the bags into his house, and ranged them in order before his wife. He then emptied the bags, which raised such a great heap of gold as dazzled his wife's eyes, and then he told her the whole adventure from beginning to end, and above all, recommended her to keep it secret. The wife rejoiced greatly at their good fortune, and would count all the gold piece by piece. Ali Baba said, "Wife, you do not know what you undertake when you pretend to count the money. You will never have done. I will dig a hole and bury it. There is no time to be lost." Ali Baba's wife replied, "You are in the right, husband, but let us know as nigh as possible how much we have. I will borrow a small measure and measure it while you dig the hole." In the meantime, Cassim's wife was very uneasy when night came, and her husband was not returned. She ran to Ali Baba in great alarm and said, "Cassim's wife, Vo, I believe, brother-in-law, that you know Cassim is gone to the forest, and upon what account? It is now night, and he has not returned. I am afraid some misfortune has happened to him. Ali Baba told her that she need not frighten herself, for that certainly Cassim would not think it proper to come into the town till the night should be pretty far advanced. Cassim's wife, considering how much it concerned her husband to keep the business secret, was the more easily persuaded to believe her brother-in-law. She went home again and waited patiently till midnight. Then her fear redoubled, and her grief was the more sensible because she was forced to keep it to herself. She repented of her foolish curiosity and cursed her desire of prying into the affairs of her brother and sister-in-law. She spent all the night in weeping, and as soon as it was day went to them, telling them by her tears the cause of her coming. Ali Baba did not wait for his sister-in-law to desire him to go to see what was become of Cassim, but departed immediately with his 3 asses, begging of her first to moderate her grief. He went to the forest, and when he came near the rock, having seen neither his brother nor his mules on his way, was seriously alarmed at finding some blood spilt near the door, which he took for an ill omen. But when he had pronounced the word, and the door had opened, he was struck with horror at the dismal sight of his brother's body. He was not long in determining how he should pay the last dues to his brother, but without adverting to the little fraternal affection he had shown for him, went into the cave to find something to enshroud his remains. Having loaded one of his asses with them, he covered them over with wood. The other 2 asses he loaded with bags of gold, covering them with wood also as before, and then, bidding the door shut, he came away, but was so cautious as to stop some time at the end of the forest, that he might not go into the town before night. When he came home, he drove the 2 asses loaded with gold into his little yard, and left the care of unloading them to his wife, while he led the other to his sister-in-law's house. In this manner Cassim's melancholy death was concealed and hushed up between Ali Baba, his widow, and Morgiana, his slave, with so much contrivance that nobody in the city had the least knowledge or suspicion of the cause of it. 3 or 4 days after the funeral, Ali Baba removed his few goods openly to his sister's house, in which it was agreed that he should in future live, but the money he had taken from the robbers he conveyed thither by night. As for Cassim's warehouse, he entrusted it entirely to the management of his eldest son. While these things were being done, the 40 robbers again visited their retreat in the forest. Great then was their surprise to find Cassim's body taken away, with some of their bags of gold. Robber Captain, VO. We are certainly discovered. The removal of the body and the loss of some of our money plainly shows that the man whom we killed had an accomplice, and for our own lives' sake, we must try to find him. What say you, my lads? All the robbers unanimously approved of the captain's proposal. Robber Captain VO. Well, one of you, the boldest and most skillful among you, must go into the town disguised as a traveler and a stranger, to try if he can hear any talk of the man whom we have killed, and endeavor to find out who he was and where he lived. This is a matter of the first importance, and for fear of any treachery I propose that whoever undertakes this business without success, even though the failure arises only from an error of judgment, shall suffer death. Without waiting for the sentiments of his companions, one of the robbers started up and said, Robber, VO, I submit to this condition and think it an honor to expose my life to serve the troop. After this robber had received great commendations from the captain and his comrades, he disguised himself so that nobody would take him for what he was, and taking his leave of the troop that night, he went into the town just at daybreak. He walked up and down, till accidentally he came to Baba Mustafa's stall, which was always open before any of the shops. Baba Mustafa was seated with an awl in his hand, just going to work. The robber saluted him, bidding him good morrow, and perceiving that he was old, said, Robber, VO, honest man, you begin to work very early. Is it possible that one of your age can see so well? I question, even if it were somewhat lighter, whether you could see to stitch. Baba Mustafa, VO. You do not know me. For old as I am, I have extraordinary good eyes, and you will not doubt it when I tell you that I sewed the body of a dead man together in a place where I had not so much light as I have now. Robber, VO. A dead body. Baba Mustafa Vo. Yes, I see you want me to speak out, but you shall know no more. The robber felt sure that he had discovered what he sought. He pulled out a piece of gold and putting it into Baba Mustafa's hand said to him, Robber, Vo, I do not want to learn your secret, though I can assure you you might safely trust me with it. The only thing I desire of you is to show me the house where you stitched up the dead body. Baba Mustafa, Vo, if I were disposed to do you that favor, I assure you I cannot. I was taken to a certain place, whence I was led blindfold to the house, and afterward brought back in the same manner. You see, therefore, the impossibility of my doing what you desire. Robber, Vo, well, you may, however, remember a little of the way that you were led blindfold. Come, let me blind your eyes at the same place. We will walk together. Perhaps you may recognize some part, and as everyone should be paid for his trouble, here is another piece of gold for you. Gratify me in what I ask. So saying, he put another piece of gold into his hand. The 2 pieces of gold were great temptations to Baba Mustafa. He looked at them a long time in his hand without saying a word, but at last he pulled out his purse and put them in. Baba Mustafa, Vo, I cannot promise that I can remember the way exactly, but since you desire, I will try what I can do. At these words, Baba Mustafa rose up, to the great joy of the robber, and led him to the place where Morgiana had bound his eyes. Baba Mustafa, Vo, it was here I was blindfolded, and I turned this way. The robber tied his handkerchief over his eyes and walked by him till he stopped directly at Cassim's house, where Ali Baba then lived. The thief, before he pulled off the band, marked the door with a piece of chalk, which he had ready in his hand, and then asked him if he knew whose house that was. To which Baba Mustafa replied that as he did not live in that neighborhood, he could not tell. The robber, finding that he could discover no more from Baba Mustafa, thanked him for the trouble he had taken and left him to go back to his stall, while he returned to the forest, persuaded that he should be very well received. A little after the robber and Baba Mustafa had parted, Morgiana went out of Ali Baba's house upon some errand, and upon her return, seeing the mark the robber had made, stopped to observe it. Morgiana, Vo, what can be the meaning of this mark? Somebody intends my master no good. However, with whatever intention it was done, it is advisable to guard against the worst. Accordingly, she fetched a piece of chalk and marked 2 or 3 doors on each side in the same manner, without saying a word to her master or mistress. In the meantime, the robber rejoined his troop in the forest and recounted to them his success, expatiating upon his good fortune in meeting so soon with the only person who could inform him of what he wanted to know. All the robbers listened to him with the utmost satisfaction. Then the captain, after commending his diligence, addressing himself to them all, said, Robber Captain Vo, comrades, we have no time to lose. Let us set off well armed without its appearing who we are, but that we may not excite any suspicion, let only 1 or 2 go into the town together and join at our rendezvous, which shall be the great square. In the meantime, our comrade, who brought us the good news, and I will go and find out the house, that we may consult what had best be done. This speech and plan was approved of by all, and they were soon ready. They filed off in parties of 2 each, after some interval of time, and got into the town without being in the least suspected. The captain, and he who had visited the town in the morning as spy, came in the last. He led the captain into the street where he had marked Ali Baba's residence, and when they came to the first of the houses which Morgiana had marked, he pointed it out. But the captain observed that the next door was chalked in the same manner and in the same place, and showing it to his guide, asked him which house it was, that or the first. The guide was so confounded that he knew not what answer to make, but he was still more puzzled when he and the captain saw 5 or 6 houses similarly marked. He assured the captain with an oath that he had marked but one and could not tell who had chalked the rest, so that he could not distinguish the house which the cobbler had stopped at. The captain, finding that their design had proved abortive, went directly to their place of rendezvous and told his troop that they had lost their labor and must return to their cave. He himself set them the example, and they all returned as they had come. When the troop was all got together, the captain told them the reason of their returning, and presently the conductor was declared by all worthy of death. He condemned himself, acknowledging that he ought to have taken better precaution and prepared to receive the stroke from him who was appointed to cut off his head. But as the safety of the troop required the discovery of the second intruder into the cave, another of the gang, who promised himself that he should succeed better, presented himself. And his offer being accepted, he went and corrupted Baba Mustafa, as the other had done, and being shown the house, marked it in a place more remote from sight, with red chalk. Not long after, Morgiana, whose eyes nothing could escape, went out, and seeing the red chalk, and arguing with herself as she had done before, marked the other neighbors' houses in the same place and manner. The robber, on his return to his company, valued himself much on the precaution he had taken, which he looked upon as an infallible way of distinguishing Ali Baba's house from the others. And the captain and all of them thought it must succeed. They conveyed themselves into the town with the same precaution as before, but when the robber and his captain came to the street, they found the same difficulty, at which the captain was enraged, and the robber in as great confusion as his predecessor. Thus the captain and his troop were forced to retire a second time, and much more dissatisfied, while the robber who had been the author of the mistake underwent the same punishment, which he willingly submitted to. The captain, having lost 2 brave fellows of his troop, was afraid of diminishing it too much by pursuing this plan to get information of the residents of their conduct. He found by their example that their heads were not so good as their hands on such occasions, and therefore resolved to take upon himself the important commission. Accordingly, he went and addressed himself to Baba Mustafa, who did him the same service he had done to the other robbers. He did not set any particular mark on the house, but examined and observed it so carefully, by passing often by it, that it was impossible for him to mistake it. The captain, well satisfied with his attempt, and informed of what he wanted to know, returned to the forest, and when he came into the cave where the troop waited for him, said, "Robber Captain, Vo, now, comrades, nothing can prevent our full revenge, as I am certain of the house, and on my way hither I have thought how to put it into execution, but if anyone can form a better expedient, let him communicate it." He then told them his contrivance, and as they approved of it, ordered them to go into the villages about and buy 19 mules with 38 large leather jars, one full of oil and the others empty. In 2 or 3 days' time the robbers had purchased the mules and jars, and as the mouths of the jars were rather too narrow for his purpose, the captain caused them to be widened, and after having put one of his men into each, with the weapons which he thought fit, leaving open the seam which had been undone to leave them room to breathe, he rubbed the jars on the outside with oil from the full vessel. Things being thus prepared, when the 19 mules were loaded with 37 robbers in jars and the jar of oil, the captain, as their driver, set out with them, and reached the town by the dusk of the evening, as he had intended. He led them through the streets till he came to Ali Baba's, at whose door he designed to have knocked, but was prevented by his sitting there after supper to take a little fresh air. He stopped his mules, addressed himself to him and said, "Robber Captain, V.O., I have brought some oil a great way to sell at tomorrow's market, and it is now so late that I do not know where to lodge. If I should not be troublesome to you, do me the favor to let me pass the night with you, and I shall be very much obliged by your hospitality." Though Ali Baba had seen the captain of the robbers in the forest and had heard him speak, it was impossible to know him in the disguise of an oil merchant. He told him he should be welcome, and immediately opened his gates for the mules to go into the yard. At the same time he called to a slave, and ordered him, when the mules were unloaded, to put them into the stable and to feed them, and then went to Morgiana, to bid her get a good supper for his guest. After they had finished supper, Ali Baba, charging Morgiana afresh to take care of his guest, said to her, "Ali Baba, Vo, tomorrow morning I design to go to the bath before day. Take care my bathing linen be ready, give them to Abdallah, which was the slave's name, and make me some good broth against I return." After this, he went to bed. In the meantime, the captain of the robbers went into the yard and took off the lid of each jar and gave his people orders what to do. Beginning at the first jar and so on to the last, he said to each man, "Robber Captain, Vo, as soon as I throw some stones out of the chamber window where I lie, do not fail to come out, and I will immediately join you. After this, he returned into the house, when Morgiana, taking up a light, conducted him to his chamber, where she left him. And he, to avoid any suspicion, put the light out soon after, and laid himself down in his clothes, that he might be the more ready to rise. Morgiana, remembering Ali Baba's orders, got his bathing linen ready, and ordered Abdallah to set on the pot for the broth. But while she was preparing it, the lamp went out, and there was no more oil in the house, nor any candles. What to do she did not know, for the broth must be made. Abdallah, seeing her very uneasy, said, "Abdallah, Vo, do not fret and tease yourself, but go into the yard and take some oil out of one of the jars." Morgiana thanked Abdallah for his advice, took the oil pot, and went into the yard. When, as she came nigh the first jar, the robber within said softly, "Robber, Vo, is it time?" Though naturally much surprised at finding a man in the jar instead of the oil she wanted, she immediately felt the importance of keeping silence, as Ali Baba, his family, and herself were in great danger, and collecting herself, without showing the least emotion, she answered, "Morgiana, Vo, not yet, but presently." She went quietly in this manner to all the jars, giving the same answer, till she came to the jar of oil. By this means Morgiana found that her master Ali Baba had admitted 38 robbers into his house, and that this pretended oil merchant was their captain. She made what haste she could to fill her oil pot, and returned into the kitchen, where, as soon as she had lighted her lamp, she took a great kettle, went again to the oil jar, filled the kettle, set it on a large wood fire, and as soon as it boiled, went and poured enough into every jar to stifle and destroy the robber within. When this action, worthy of the courage of Morgiana, was executed without any noise, as she had projected, she returned into the kitchen with the empty kettle, and having put out the great fire she had made to boil the oil, and leaving just enough,